Academy of Sciences report. Forensic scientists have come under fire for exaggerating and for making errors. We're going to talk about some of those today. But let's get specific. What exactly are these problems that I'm alluding to in more general terms? I think the problems are claims that the forensic scientists make about their work. And I want to start with this one right here, that only one object or person in the world could have created that marking or print, otherwise known as individualization. Many people in the academic community are criticizing forensic scientists for making such claims, or saying he's the source to the exclusion of all other people in the world. It's a very strong claim. It implies that all other possible sources have been tested, or at least have been ruled out somehow. And a very legitimate question is, how do they know? So let's say your fingerprint matches up with some crime scene latent print. How do we know that somebody else's doesn't also match up? You might say, well, because we all have unique fingerprints. I would say to you, how do you know that? Who's done that? Who's done that test? How do you know that? We've all grown up here and everybody has unique fingerprints, but nobody's actually done the test. So individualization is a very strong claim. I'm not saying that it's necessarily false. I'm just saying that it's presumed to be true in so many areas that it's worth taking a hard look at. 100% certain identification. This is a very common way that experts testify. I'm going to give you a demonstration of that in just a moment. Another strong claim they make is that all trained examiners would agree. So not only we've got individualization, it's 100% certain, and every trained examiner would agree that it's an individualization, and they agree with 100% certainty. And what's the rate of error? 0. There's no possibility that I could err. Now, at this point, you must think, this is a little over the top. This isn't what really goes on in court. This isn't what fingerprint examiners or any kind of examiners really say. This is what a speaker says when he has a captive audience of people who go to talks in a lawful conviction series. So what I want to do is I want to play a clip for you from the head of the FBI's latent print lab, actually. His name is Stephen Meager. He's actually former head at the time he was the head. This is a brief clip from 60 Minutes. Stephen Meager will be talking to 60 Minutes correspondent Leslie Stokes.
Here's how fingerprints are matched in primetime dramas, automatically by computer. But that never happens in real-life forensic work.
The computer doesn't then sort of blink red, match, nothing like that.
It does not.
Steve Meager heads up the crime scene fingerprint unit at the FBI. He says a computer like this one at the Bureau sorts through a database of 44 million sets of prints, but that merely narrows the search.
And it filters out the best likely candidates that the human would want to compare.
And then the humans, the fingerprint examiners, make the actual match the way they always have, by eye. In fact, it's arduous work involving human judgment. An examiner can spend hours, even days, analyzing a fragment of a fingerprint. Meager demonstrated how an examiner would compare a suspect's fingerprint with a latent print, which is what they call one found at a crime scene.
This would be what I would consider to be the good quality latent print.
Really? I was about to say, look at that ugly smudge. That's not good.
Well, that particular area is a little difficult to see, but overall the impression is very good.
By latent print standards, this is extraordinarily good. Usually, police lift only fragments at a crime scene, and they can be contaminated or distorted. The first thing an examiner compares is what's called ridge flow.
Is it the same? Is it a moral pattern, circular? Yes, it is. Okay? Is it basically the same size, and we can measure that by the number of intervening ridges? Okay?
An examiner studies the width of the ridges and the direction in which they flow.
We can select any ridge that we wanted and follow the path of that ridge At this point, you see a bifurcation. Now, I would be looking for that same information over here, noting that here's the bifurcation that corresponds.
That bifurcation would be a point of similarity. He looked for several of those points and double-checked to make sure there wasn't the slightest discrepancy between the two.
The latent print is in fact identical with the known
It's
exemplar.
identical?
Yes.
However,
Yes,
what are the chances that it's still not the right person?
0.
0.
It's a positive identification.
Does an FBI agent or any fingerprint expert ever go into court and say, I believe it's a match with 80% certainty or 90% certainty?
Now, we go in with a 100% certainty that we have an identification.
You thought I was kidding. 100% certainty they've got an identification. So this, I think, is very interesting because jurors generally don't know this, and if the examiner on the stand is asked for their certainty level in any fingerprint case, they're always going to report 100% certainty. So how confident are you? 100%. And the juror's going to think, wow, this isn't just a match. This is a great match. This is a 100% certain match. This is definitely it. And of course, you've heard the 0% chance of error from the head person of the FBI. So this is very common. This is what you see across the board. So I think it would help to, in understanding why forensic science makes such strong claims, to understand what are the basic assumptions of the discipline, where are they coming from? And this is a key assumption. This is really the key assumption, I believe, in the forensic sciences. This is really the key to understanding why people who are not forensic scientists think so differently about forensic science. People who are trying to understand it as a science think so differently. Different sources make distinguishable markings. Okay, if I have 2 hammers in my hand, if I hammer on the desk this way, and I hammer on the desk this way, those 2 hammers, even if they're manufactured by the same manufacturer, will make different markings. And a trained examiner can distinguish between the markings made by this hammer and the markings made by that hammer. And that's fundamental to forensic science. Okay? Different sources make distinguishable markings. And if you buy that, I'm asking you to remember your propositional logic now. A implies B, then you wind up with not B implies not A. Right, remember this? So if different sources imply distinguishable markings, that means if the markings are indistinguishable, if the examiner can't distinguish between the 2 markings, then they must have a common source. Right? So if the examiner can't distinguish between a latent print found at a crime scene and a reference print from a suspect, the suspect must have left the latent print. It's a very, very strong assumption, but it does follow from this one. So this is the one that I think we should be looking into. Is it really true that different sources leave distinguishable markings? And the claim is, well, if you're a trained examiner, if you're an experienced examiner, yes. If you're not trained or not experienced, then perhaps not. And this is often a common refrain in forensic sciences that when you find discrepancies, they'll say, well, that person's not sufficiently trained. They don't have enough experience. If only the experience that I had, they would be able to see that those are distinguishable markings after all. So now we have a few references to this National Academy of Science report. I don't know if we've been here for other talks or other people have mentioned it. My guess is somebody has. These are the co-chairs of the report, Harry Edwards and Constantine Gatsonis. Edwards is a judge in the D.C. Circuit, very respected. Gatsonis is a very respected statistician at Brown. There were 17 members on this committee from all walks, some forensic scientists, some biologists, geneticists. He was a lawyer. All different types of people were on this. And they came down on the forensic sciences in a very tough way. But their mission, by the way, was to look at all the non-DNA forensic sciences. The National Academy of Sciences to take a look at the spectrum of forensic sciences, non-DNA, and see what's there. And I say non-DNA, it was non-DNA because there already were a couple of reports published about DNA in 1992 and 1996. And those reports, in a nutshell, said DNA is good. And it's not that it was problem-free, but in 1992 they said go for it, and they recommended that examiners get certified and laboratory get accredited, and that proficiency testing take place on a regular basis. In 1996, they made some statistical corrections to the way the random match probabilities are calculated with DNA, but for the most part, they went ahead and said, things are fine with DNA. So we didn't really need to look at DNA again. And here's some of the conclusions that they reached on validation in particular. They said was kind of shocking. There's little rigorous systematic research. Rigorous systematic research has been done to validate the basic premises and techniques in a number of forensic science disciplines. That's really puzzling. Little rigorous systematic research has been done to validate the basic premises. I mean, the basic premise that you can match a latent print to another person's print. I mean, haven't we done that research? How is it that we've been introducing that in court for literally 100 years? Ever since People versus Jennings here in Illinois first introduced fingerprint evidence. How is that possible? Well, People versus Jennings didn't look at any studies. What they did was they looked at what was going on in England. They said it's been going on in England for 20 years, we haven't heard any problems there, so let's bring it in now. So there was never any incentive for the forensic science community to do the basic tests that showed that they could do what they claim they can do. Now you might say, oh, well, 100 years, wouldn't we know? Wouldn't there be lots and lots of problems if there was a problem? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes it's hard to know if there is a problem. It's hard to know if somebody's been convicted on a fingerprint match when, in fact, the person didn't really match, because after all, that's what convicts them. When people look at the case, they say, well, we got the fingerprint match. So it's a bit circular. It's really hard to know whether fingerprints or any other forensic science are extremely accurate unless they're tested. And that's the magic component that seems to be missing. Nobody's testing the forensic science. Nobody's checking to see, can they do what they say they can do? What's their accuracy rate? What's their error rate? Fingerprinting is the oldest of the forensic sciences, the most venerable, and in many cases people hold fingerprints up as the gold standard. I think DNA has replaced fingerprints as the gold standard, but I think the idea of standards in fingerprinting seems pretty elementary. There must be standards associated with what you call it fingerprint matches. I just want to finish up that Leslie Stahl to get the answer.
Discovered that not only has there never been a study of the reliability of crime scene fingerprint matching, but there are no agreed upon standards for what constitutes a match.
There's no universal standard.
There's complete disagreement amongst fingerprint examiners themselves as to what they need to see in order to declare a match.
Did that surprise